There is a temple that exists nowhere and everywhere. It has no doors, yet everyone enters it. It has no walls, yet it contains the entire universe. This temple is built not of stone, but of longing, not of brick, but of desire, and its altar, the human heart. In this temple, there hangs a mirror. But this is no ordinary mirror. When you look into it, you do not see yourself as you are. You see yourself as you wish to be. You see yourself completed, whole, radiant with meaning. And standing beside your reflection is another figure, someone who seems to contain everything you believe you lack. This is the temple of the lover. And you, whether you know it or not, have been here before. Tonight, we enter this temple together. We will walk through its corridors of memory and myth, descend into its darkest chambers where passion becomes possession, and emerge, if we are brave enough, with something more precious than love itself: understanding, the lover archetype. It whispers in poetry, it screams in madness, it builds civilizations and destroys them. It is the force that moves mountains and the poison that corrupts kingdoms. It is perhaps the most misunderstood power in human consciousness. We call it love, we call it desire, we call it romance. But these words are shadows on a wall, flickering representations of something far more profound and dangerous. What if I told you that everything you call love is in fact a form of seeing, that when you love someone, you are not experiencing them, you are experiencing yourself, that the beloved is a mirror held up to your own psyche, reflecting not who they are but who you need them to be. This is not cynicism, this is not a denial of love's power. This is something far more extraordinary. It is an invitation to understand the mechanism of the soul itself. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who mapped the territories of the unconscious mind, spoke of archetypes, fundamental patterns of human experience that exist beyond culture, beyond time, woven into the very fabric of consciousness itself: the mother, the father, the hero, the shadow. And among these primordial forces, one of the most powerful and perilous, the lover. The lover is not merely romantic love, it is the archetype of connection itself. It is the force that drives us toward union with another person, with beauty, with art, with the divine, with life itself. It is eros in its fullest sense, the magnetic pull toward wholeness, the hunger to transcend our isolated existence and merge with something greater than ourselves. But here lies the paradox, the terrible beauty at the heart of this archetype. In seeking union, we often create the deepest separation. In reaching for wholeness, we fragment ourselves. In trying to possess what we love, we lose what we love. And in looking into the mirror of the other, we often fail to recognize that we are seeing only ourselves. This is the story we will tell tonight. Not a simple story, but a labyrinth. Not a comfortable lesson, but a descent into the depths where passion and possession intertwine like serpents, where love and ego cannot be easily separated, where the quest for connection reveals the profound solitude at the heart of existence. Imagine, if you will, a young person falling in love for the first time. The world transforms, colors become more vivid, music carries hidden meanings. Time itself seems to bend around the presence of the beloved. This is not metaphor, this is neuroscience. The brain, flooded with dopamine, oxytocin and norepinephrine, enters a state remarkably similar to obsessive-compulsive disorder. The beloved becomes an intrusive thought, a beautiful invasion of consciousness. But what is actually happening? The person believes they are seeing the other clearly, perhaps for the first time in their life. They believe they have found someone who truly understands them, completes them, sees the hidden truth of who they are. They speak the ancient words, "You complete me. You are my other half. I was incomplete until I found you." These words, beautiful as they sound, contain a dangerous untruth. They reveal that the lover archetype has been activated not in its integrated conscious form, but in its possessive unconscious manifestation. The other person has become a screen upon which you project the missing pieces of yourself. They are no longer themselves. They have become your salvation, your completion, your purpose. And this is where love begins its transformation into possession. The ancient Greeks understood something we have forgotten. They knew there were many kinds of love: eros, the passionate, consuming desire; philia, the deep friendship; storge, the natural affection; and agape, the unconditional, universal love. But in our modern age, we have collapsed these distinctions. We have made romantic love, eros, into the supreme form of human connection, the ultimate source of meaning and validation. And in doing so, we have created a crisis of consciousness. The lover archetype calls us toward beauty, toward connection, toward the ecstatic experience of transcending our boundaries. But like all archetypes, it casts a shadow, and the shadow of the lover is the possessor, the force that seeks not to appreciate beauty, but to own it, not to connect, but to consume, not to love, but to merge so completely that the beloved loses their separate existence. This shadow operates in subtle ways. It appears in the jealousy that masquerades as care, in the surveillance that pretends to be concern, in the manipulation that calls itself love, in the suffocation that claims to be devotion. The shadow of the lover builds golden cages and calls them homes. It writes possessive contracts and calls them vows. It demands fusion and calls it intimacy. And here is the terrible truth. Most of us spend our lives moving between these two poles, the luminous lover and the dark possessor, never quite understanding which force is guiding us at any given moment. Tonight, we will map this territory. We will trace the origins of the lover archetype through myth and neuroscience, through poetry and psychology. We will descend into the darkest manifestations of love gone wrong: obsession, addiction, violence born from rejected desire. We will examine how projection works, how we create elaborate fantasies about who someone is, and then fall in love with our own creations. We will explore the neuroscience of attachment and betrayal, the philosophy of desire, and the spiritual traditions that saw romantic love as both a path to enlightenment and a dangerous illusion. But most importantly, we will discover what lies beyond possession. We will find the integrated lover, the archetype in its mature, conscious form, the capacity to connect deeply without losing yourself, the ability to appreciate beauty without needing to own it, the wisdom to see another person clearly, not as a projection of your needs, but as a separate consciousness with their own journey, their own mystery, their own irreducible otherness. This journey will be uncomfortable. It will ask you to examine your own patterns of love and attachment with unflinching honesty. It will invite you to see how you use others to avoid confronting yourself. It will reveal the ways you have been possessed and the ways you have sought to possess. It will show you the mirror for what it truly is, not a window into another soul, but a reflection of your own hidden depths. But if you can stay with this discomfort, if you can resist the urge to turn away from these difficult truths, something remarkable happens. The mirror becomes transparent. You begin to see the other as they actually are, and in that seeing, in that moment of genuine recognition, something more profound than possession becomes possible. Some call it authentic love, some call it compassion, some call it freedom. Whatever name we give it, it represents an evolutionary leap in consciousness, the movement from narcissistic fusion to genuine connection, from possession to appreciation, from the hunger to consume to the capacity to witness and honor. This is the promise and the danger of the lover archetype. It is the fire that can warm or destroy, the force that can elevate consciousness or trap it in eternal cycles of craving and disappointment. Understanding this archetype is not merely an intellectual exercise, it is quite literally a matter of psychological survival. For those who never integrate the lover remain forever children in the temple, mistaking their reflections for reality, forever reaching for wholeness in another person's arms, forever disappointed when the mirror reveals only themselves. So let us begin. Let us walk together into this temple of mirrors and shadows, of passion and possession. Let us trace the origins of desire itself and follow its transformation from the first stirrings of attraction to the heights of ecstatic union and the depths of destructive obsession. Let us become archaeologists of the heart and anthropologists of attachment, exploring the ruins of failed romances and the wisdom of ancient love mystics. The journey will be long, the terrain will be difficult, but the destination, true understanding of how love works, how projection operates, how we can connect without possessing, is worth every step. Welcome to the archetype of the lover. Welcome to the mirror. Welcome to yourself. In the beginning, there was no longing because there was no separation. This is not poetry. This is science. This is philosophy. This is the fundamental truth from which all love, all desire, all yearning emerges, the experience of being separate. Picture, if you will, a human infant, fresh from the womb, barely days old. This tiny being does not yet know where they end and where the world begins. The mother's breast, the mother's heartbeat, the mother's warmth, these are not experienced as separate from the self. There is no I and you. There is only a unified field of sensation and need and satisfaction. This is what psychologists call the oceanic state, the original condition of undifferentiated unity. And though we leave this state behind as we develop ego boundaries and a sense of individual identity, we never quite forget it. It remains in the unconscious as a memory, a template, a paradise lost. And every falling in love, every moment of passionate connection, every ecstatic union is, in some sense, an attempt to return to this original state of oneness. The ancient Greeks told a story about this. In Plato's Symposium, the playwright Aristophanes offers an account of love's origin that resonates with profound psychological truth. He says that originally, human beings were different from how we are now. We were complete, spherical creatures with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 faces. We were powerful, whole, self-sufficient. So powerful, in fact, that we threatened the gods themselves. Zeus, in his jealous wisdom, decided to cut each human being in half. From that moment forward, every person was incomplete, severed from their other half, condemned to wander the earth searching for their lost complement. And when 2 people who were once part of the same whole found each other, Aristophanes says they would cling to each other with such desperation that they would die of hunger and thirst, refusing to let go even to sustain themselves. This is the myth of the soulmate. This is the archetypal pattern that still governs how many of us think about love. We are incomplete. Somewhere out there is the one person who will make us whole. Finding them is destiny. Losing them is death. But here's what the myth reveals when we look deeper. This is not a story about finding completion. It is a story about trauma. It is about beings who were once whole, who were then violently severed, and who now spend their lives trying to heal a wound that defines their very existence. The search for the beloved is not the search for another person. It is the search for the lost part of yourself. This is the origin of the lover archetype, not in connection, but in separation, not in wholeness, but in the wound of individuation. Carl Jung understood this with remarkable clarity. He wrote about what he called the Anima and Animus, the internal, unconscious images of the opposite sex that every person carries within them. For a man, the anima is the feminine aspect of his psyche, his capacity for emotion, intuition, receptivity. For a woman, the animus is the masculine aspect, her capacity for assertion, logic, action. These internal figures are not just abstract psychological constructs. They are alive. They have agency. They influence our thoughts, our dreams, our desires, and most importantly, they determine who we fall in love with. When a man falls in love with a woman, Jung says, he is not actually seeing the woman in front of him. He is projecting his anima onto her. He is falling in love with his own inner feminine, externalized and embodied in another person. The woman becomes a screen, a mirror, a vessel for carrying what he cannot yet acknowledge in himself. The same happens in reverse. A woman falling in love with a man often projects her animus onto him, seeing in him the qualities of strength, decisiveness, or intellectual power that she has not yet fully claimed as her own. And here is where the trap closes. Both people believe they are in love with each other, when in fact they are in love with themselves, or rather, with the lost, disowned, or undeveloped parts of themselves that they see reflected in the other. This is projection. This is the mechanism at the heart of romantic love, and it is both the source of love's intensity and the cause of its inevitable disappointment. But we must go deeper still. We must understand not just the psychology of projection, but the neurobiology of desire itself. Because the lover archetype is not merely a cultural construct or a Jungian abstraction. It is hardwired into the very structure of the human brain. When you see someone you're attracted to, a cascade of neurochemical events begins. The ventral tegmental area of your brain, the reward center, floods with dopamine. This is the same chemical released by cocaine, by gambling, by any experience that promises reward. Your brain is literally experiencing a drug high. But it doesn't stop there. The caudate nucleus, involved in reward detection and expectation, becomes hyperactive. You begin to focus obsessively on the object of your desire. Your thoughts return again and again to this person, to memories of them, to fantasies about them. This is not a choice. This is your brain restructuring itself around a new source of potential reward. Meanwhile, serotonin levels drop, the same pattern seen in obsessive-compulsive disorder. This is why love feels like madness. This is why you check your phone compulsively, why you drive past their house, why you interpret every glance and word as laden with hidden meaning. And then there's oxytocin, the bonding hormone released during physical intimacy, during sex, during moments of deep connection. Oxytocin creates attachment. It makes you feel safe with this person, linked to them, unable to imagine life without them. In evolutionary terms, this made sense. Bonding helped ensure that parents would stay together long enough to raise vulnerable offspring. But here's the dark side. Oxytocin also enhances in-group loyalty and out-group suspicion. It makes you protective, sometimes pathologically so. It can transform devotion into jealousy, connection into possession. The brain in love is not thinking rationally about compatibility or long-term happiness. It is not making conscious choices. It is being hijacked by ancient systems designed for mating, bonding, and reproduction. Systems that care nothing for your happiness or psychological development. And yet, despite this neurochemical storm, despite the unconscious projections and ancient evolutionary drives, we tell ourselves a story. We tell ourselves that love is about recognizing the soul of another person. We tell ourselves that we have found someone special, someone different, someone who truly understands us. This story is not entirely false, but it is not entirely true either. It is a narrative constructed by consciousness to make sense of processes that are largely unconscious. It is the ego's attempt to claim authorship over experiences that emerge from depths the ego cannot access. The lover archetype, in its initial activation, overwhelms consciousness. It is numinous, a word Jung used to describe experiences of the sacred, the overwhelming, the wholly other. When the archetype is activated, you feel chosen by fate. You feel that this love is different from all others. You feel that normal rules don't apply. You are special. This connection is unique. This is the one. And in that feeling of specialness, in that sense of being chosen by fate, lies both the beauty and the danger of romantic love. The poets knew this. The mystics understood it. Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet, wrote, "The lover's food is the love of the bread. No bread need be at hand. No one who is sincere in his love is a slave to existence." What does this mean? It means that the true lover is not seeking the physical person. They are seeking the experience of love itself, the state of ecstatic unity, the dissolution of boundaries, the transcendence of the separate self. The beloved is a gateway, not a destination. In Sufi mysticism, romantic love was understood as a reflection of divine love. The beloved on earth was a mirror of the beloved in heaven. To love a person was to be initiated into the mystery of loving God. But this only worked if you understood that the human beloved was a symbol, a stepping stone, a means of accessing something beyond themselves. The danger came when you mistook the symbol for the reality, when you became attached to the person rather than seeing through them to the transcendent, when you grasped instead of surrendered, when possession replaced appreciation. This is why so many mystical traditions warned about romantic love even as they celebrated it. They knew it could lead to enlightenment or to catastrophic delusion. Everything depended on whether you recognized the game you were playing, whether you understood that the beloved was a mirror, not a destination. But most people do not understand this. Most people fall in love unconsciously, swept up in the neurochemical cascade, projecting their anima or animus onto another person, telling themselves stories of destiny and soulmates, believing they have found the one who will make them complete. And then, inevitably, the spell begins to break. It might take months, it might take years, but at some point, the projection begins to fail. The dopamine rush fades. You start to see the actual person in front of you, not the idealized image, not the carrier of your anima, but a real human being with flaws, with limitations, with their own needs and projections and psychological wounds. This moment, this falling away of projection, is one of the most crucial junctures in any intimate relationship. Some people mistake it for falling out of love. They conclude that this person wasn't the right one after all, and they go searching for someone new, someone who can carry the projection more effectively, someone who can sustain the illusion of completion a little longer. This is the addiction pattern of the immature lover, an endless sequence of idealization, disappointment, and abandonment, always searching for the one who will finally make them whole, always disappointed when real intimacy threatens to replace fantasy. But there is another possibility. In the moment when projection fails, when you see the other person clearly for perhaps the first time, you have a choice. You can mourn the loss of the fantasy and begin the difficult work of genuine relationship, learning to love a real person rather than an imaginary ideal. Or you can try to force reality back into conformity with your projection. And this is when love becomes possession. We have traced the origins now. We understand where the lover archetype comes from the original wound of separation, from the neurochemistry of desire, from the unconscious projections of anima and animus, from the mystical longing for unity, from the evolutionary drives that shaped our ancestors. We understand that falling in love is not primarily about the other person at all. It is about you, your projections, your needs, your undeveloped capacities, your hunger for wholeness. The other is a mirror, and like all mirrors, it shows you what you need to see, not what is objectively there. But mirrors can be dangerous. When you don't realize you're looking at a reflection, when you reach toward the mirror believing it to be a window, when you try to pass through glass thinking it is air, that is when the mirror shatters. That is when blood is drawn. That is when love transforms into something darker. Now we must descend. We must enter the shadow territory. where passion curdles into obsession, where devotion becomes control, where the lover archetype inverts into its demonic opposite. We must witness what happens when the mirror is mistaken for reality, when projection becomes possession, when love, that most beautiful of human capacities, becomes the mechanism of destruction. The temple has many chambers. We have seen the entrance hall, bright and inviting. Now we descend into the crypts. There is a moment when love crosses a threshold, a moment when appreciation becomes appropriation, when desire becomes demand, when connection becomes consumption. This moment is often invisible to those experiencing it. It feels like devotion. It feels like care. It feels like the depth of feeling justifies any action, any intrusion, any violation of boundary. This is the moment when the lover becomes the possessor. And it is the most dangerous transformation in human psychology. Let me tell you a story. Not a myth this time, but a pattern that repeats endlessly across cultures and centuries, a pattern you will recognize because you have seen it, lived it, or at least glimpsed it in the corner of your own heart. A person meets someone and falls deeply in love. The connection feels fated, profound, unlike anything they've experienced before. They feel seen, understood, completed. The beloved becomes the center of their universe, the source of all meaning and happiness. They say, "I cannot imagine life without you." They say, "You are my everything." They say, "I would die without you." These words seem romantic. They are inscribed in poetry, sung in songs, declared in vows. But listen to them carefully. Listen to what they actually mean. "I cannot imagine life without you" means, I have made you responsible for my existence. I have outsourced my sense of self to you. Without you, I am nothing. "You are my everything" means, I have placed the entire burden of my happiness, my purpose, my identity on your shoulders. You must carry me, complete me, validate me. "I would die without you" means, I have no independent existence. My survival is contingent on your presence. You are not a person to me. You are life support. Do you see what has happened? The beloved is no longer a person. They have become a function. They have been transformed from a separate consciousness with their own needs, desires, and journey into an object whose purpose is to fill the void in the lover's psyche. This is possession, and it masquerades as the deepest love. In Jungian psychology, this is called identification. The ego identifies with the archetype. Instead of the lover being one energy among many in the psyche, balanced by the warrior, the sage, the caregiver, it becomes the totality. The person is the lover. Everything else falls away. Friends are neglected, interests disappear. The self shrinks until only the relationship remains. Rumi wrote, "Lovers don't finally meet somewhere. They're in each other all along." Beautiful words. But there is a shadow in this beauty. When you are in each other, where do you end, and where does the other begin? When boundaries dissolve completely, who is actually present? Not two people in relationship, but two ghosts merged in a fog of projection and fantasy. The integrated lover maintains boundaries while creating intimacy. The possessed lover, or the lover who wishes to possess, seeks fusion. They want to merge completely, to occupy the same psychic space, to become one being. And fusion is not love. Fusion is the annihilation of both people. History is filled with examples of love turned to possession. Literature celebrates it even as it reveals its horror. Heathcliff and Catherine in Wuthering Heights, a love so consuming that it destroys everyone around them and ultimately themselves. "Whatever our souls are made of," Catherine says, "his and mine are the same. Not complementary, not in harmony. The same. Total fusion." Or consider the ancient Greek myth of Alcyone and Ceyx. Their love was so complete that they compared themselves to Zeus and Hera, daring to assume the roles of gods. For this hubris, the gods destroyed Ceyx in a storm. Alcyone, unable to bear separation, threw herself into the sea to join him in death. The gods, moved by pity, transformed them both into kingfisher birds, eternally together, but no longer human. The myth reveals the truth. When love becomes absolute, when another person becomes your everything, you cease to be yourself. You may be together, but you are no longer alive in any meaningful sense. Let us examine the mechanisms of possession more closely. How does the transformation happen? How does love, genuine, beautiful, life-affirming love, curdle into something destructive? It begins with idealization. In the early stages of romantic love, the beloved is perfect. Every quality is interpreted in the best possible light. Their quirks are endearing. Their flaws are overlooked or reframed as charming imperfections. They can do no wrong. This idealization is a form of projection, as we've discussed, but it's also a defense mechanism. By making the beloved perfect, you avoid having to confront the reality that they are a separate person with their own limitations. You avoid the anxiety of genuine intimacy, the vulnerability of being truly seen by another imperfect human being. But idealization cannot last. Eventually, reality intrudes. The beloved reveals themselves to be human after all. They forget your birthday. They get tired and irritable. They prioritize something else over you. They disagree with you. They exist independently. And for the possessive lover, this is intolerable. Because if the beloved is not perfect, if they are not the idealized image, then they cannot function as the solution to your incompleteness. They cannot carry your projections effectively. They cannot be your salvation. This is when idealization flips to devaluation. Overnight, it seems, the beloved transforms from perfect to flawed, from angel to betrayer. The same qualities that were once charming now become infuriating. What was endearing is now evidence of inadequacy. They are not who you thought they were. They have disappointed you. They have failed in their function. And this is where possession reveals its true face. Because the possessive lover does not respond to disappointment by acknowledging that they projected an unrealistic image onto another person. They do not take responsibility for their own expectations. Instead, they seek to control the beloved, to force them back into conformity with the ideal. This control can take many forms. Sometimes it is overt: surveillance, demands, restrictions, jealousy, accusations. Who were you talking to? Why didn't you call me back immediately? I need to know where you are at all times. You're not allowed to see them anymore. But often the control is subtle, psychological. It operates through guilt, through emotional withdrawal, through the manipulation of affection. If you really loved me, you would. I'm only worried because I care so much. How can you do this to me after everything I've done for you? This is the shadow of the lover archetype, the possessor, and it is far more common than we like to admit. It exists not only in obviously abusive relationships, but in many relationships we would call normal. It exists in parents who live through their children, in partners who check each other's phones, in friends who guilt-trip each other for spending time with others, in the person who says, "I love you," but means, "I need you to complete me." The neuroscience of this is fascinating and disturbing. Remember that initial flood of dopamine, oxytocin, and norepinephrine? As the relationship continues, as the initial rush fades, something interesting happens in the brain. The reward system adapts. It requires more of the same stimulation to achieve the same effect. You need more contact, more reassurance, more evidence of the beloved's devotion to feel satisfied. This is the neurochemistry of addiction. And make no mistake, romantic love, particularly in its possessive form, operates exactly like an addiction. The beloved becomes a drug. Their presence, their attention, their validation becomes necessary to regulate your emotional state. Without them, you experience withdrawal, anxiety, depression, obsessive thinking, even physical pain. Studies using fMRI scans have shown that people experiencing romantic rejection show activity in the same brain regions involved in cocaine cravings and physical pain. Love and addiction share neural pathways. The person you love is quite literally your drug, and like any addict, when access to the drug is threatened, you will do anything to secure it. You will lie. You will manipulate. You will bargain and plead and threaten, not because you are a bad person, but because your brain has made the beloved necessary for survival. This is the neurological substrate of possession. The person who says, "I cannot live without you," is not being poetic. They are describing a real neurochemical dependency. But we must probe even deeper. We must ask, what is the root of this hunger for possession? Why do we seek to own what we love? Why is it so difficult to appreciate without appropriating? Freud would say it traces back to infancy, to the infant's relationship with the mother, who is initially experienced as an extension of the self. The infant needs, and the mother provides. There is no separation, no awareness that the mother has her own existence. When the mother leaves, it feels like part of the self has been torn away. As we develop, we hopefully learn that the mother is a separate person. We develop what psychologists call object constancy, the understanding that people continue to exist even when they're not present, that their love persists even when they're not actively demonstrating it. But for many people, this development is incomplete. They carry into adult relationships the infant's terror of abandonment and the infant's fantasy of fusion. The beloved becomes the mother, the source of all good things, the provider of existential security. And like the infant, they cannot tolerate the beloved's separate existence. Jung would approach it differently. He would say that possession emerges when the ego is possessed by an archetype. The archetype of the lover is a powerful force in the collective unconscious, a god essentially. When you fall in love, you are being visited by a god. And if your ego is not strong enough, if you are not conscious enough, the god takes you over completely. You are no longer yourself. You are the lover, capital L. Every thought, every action, every decision is filtered through this archetypal lens. And gods, Jung reminds us, are dangerous. They are not concerned with your happiness or well-being. They have their own agenda. The agenda of the lover archetype is union at any cost. It will destroy your life to achieve its goal. It will sacrifice your friendships, your career, your health, your sanity, your very self in pursuit of merging with the beloved. The task of consciousness is not to be free from the archetypes. This is impossible. They are the structures through which we experience reality. The task is to have a relationship with them rather than being possessed by them. To say, I am experiencing the lover archetype, rather than I am in love and this justifies anything I do. Let us look at possession from yet another angle, the philosophical. What does it mean to possess something? To possess is to have exclusive rights, to control, to prevent others from accessing. Possession implies that the object possessed has no autonomous existence. It exists for you, for your use, according to your will. But a person is not an object. A person is a subject, a center of consciousness, of experience, of will. They are not for you. They are not defined by their relationship to you. They have their own irreducible otherness. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas wrote about the face of the other. When you truly encounter another person's face, not as an object to be categorized or used, but as an address from another consciousness, you experience what he called the ethical demand. The face says, "Thou shalt not kill me." It says, "I am vulnerable before you," and this vulnerability places an obligation on you not to harm me, not to reduce me to your purposes. Possession is the refusal of the face. It is the act of turning away from the other's otherness, of reducing them to what they can do for you. It is ethical violence even when it is not physical violence. And yet, despite all we know, the psychology, the neuroscience, the philosophy, the warnings from every wisdom tradition, possession remains one of the most common expressions of human love. Why? Because possession feels like safety. If you can own the beloved, if you can control them, if you can make them need you as much as you need them, then they cannot leave. They cannot reject you. They cannot reveal the terrible truth that you are, fundamentally, alone. Possession is the ego's strategy for dealing with the ontological terror of separation. If I can make you part of me, if I can merge with you completely, then I don't have to face the fact that I am a solitary consciousness in an indifferent universe. I don't have to confront my own emptiness, my own mortality, my own responsibility for creating meaning in my life. You become my shelter from existential reality, and I will do anything to maintain that shelter, even if it means destroying you in the process. The stories are endless. The man who kills his ex-wife because, if I can't have her, no one can. The woman who sabotages her partner's career because she fears being left behind. The parent who manipulates their child with guilt to prevent them from leaving home. The friend who spreads rumors to isolate their best friend from others. The lover who threatens suicide to prevent a breakup. These are extreme cases, perhaps, but the mechanism is the same across the spectrum. Possession expresses itself in degrees, from the subtle to the catastrophic, and in every case it stems from the same root, the inability to tolerate the separate existence of the other, the inability to love someone as they are, rather than as you need them to be. In possession, there is no real relationship. There is only the self and its projections. The beloved is a ghost, a puppet, a function. They speak, but you hear only your own echo. They act, but you see only your own needs reflected back. They suffer, but you feel only your own anxiety about losing control. This is the heart of darkness in the lover archetype. This is the descent we had to make, because we cannot understand love, real love, mature love, conscious love, until we have fully understood its shadow. The psychological literature has a term for the most extreme form of possessive love, limerence. Coined by psychologist Dorothy Tenoff in the 1970s, limerence describes an involuntary state of intense romantic desire characterized by intrusive thinking, emotional dependency, fear of rejection, and the tendency to interpret neutral or even negative behaviors by the beloved as evidence of hidden affection. Limerence is love experienced as madness. It is the lover archetype in its most unintegrated, most primitive form. And while not everyone experiences full limerence, most people experience some version of it in the early stages of romantic attraction. What's crucial to understand is that limerence is not about the beloved at all. Research has shown that people in limerence states know very little about the actual person they're obsessed with. They're in love with a fantasy, a projection, an image constructed from minimal information and maximum imagination. And this reveals something essential. The intensity of the feeling has nothing to do with the quality of the connection. You can feel overwhelming love for someone you barely know. You can be obsessed with someone who is terrible for you. The feeling is not evidence of destiny or deep compatibility. It is evidence that an archetype has been activated, that projections are at work, that unconscious material is being constellated, but limerence eventually fades. The question is, what comes next? For some people, the fading of limerence feels like falling out of love. They conclude the relationship was a mistake and move on to find someone new who can trigger the limerent high again. This is the pattern of the love addict, seeking the chemical rush, not genuine intimacy. For others, the fading of limerence is when the real work begins. The projections start to fail. You see the actual person more clearly. The relationship becomes less about fantasy and more about daily reality, compatibility, communication, shared values, mutual support. This can be disappointing at first, less intense, less dramatic, but it also opens the possibility of something deeper. Or, and this is the dark path, the person tries to force limerence to continue. They create drama, jealousy, conflict to maintain intensity. They manufacture uncertainty to keep the dopamine flowing. They alternate between intimacy and withdrawal, creating an intermittent reinforcement schedule that keeps their partner anxiously attached. This is psychological torture disguised as passion, but it is experienced by both parties as evidence of deep feeling. Our relationship is so intense, they say. I've never felt anything like this before. True. But what they're feeling is not love. It's neurochemical chaos. It's trauma bonding. It's the dance of possession. We must also examine the social and cultural dimensions of possession, because possession is not merely a personal psychological pattern. It is embedded in our institutions, our rituals, our language about love. Consider the traditional marriage vow. I take you to be my lawfully wedded husband, wife, to take, to possess. The father gives away the bride, ownership transferred from one man to another. In many cultures, marriage has been explicitly understood as a property transaction. Even today, in supposedly enlightened societies, the language of possession permeates romantic discourse. My boyfriend, my girlfriend, my wife, my husband. Possessive pronouns. The very grammar of love implies ownership. Or consider jealousy, almost universally regarded as evidence of love. If they're not jealous, they don't really care. Jealousy is romanticized in songs, movies, stories, but jealousy is simply the emotional expression of possessiveness. It is the feeling that arises when someone you believe you own shows interest in someone else, or when someone else shows interest in someone you believe you own. Healthy concern for a relationship is one thing, but jealousy as it's commonly experienced is not about concern. It's about control. It says, you are mine, your attention, your desire, your body belong to me. Any interest in another is a violation of my property rights. And we are taught to find this romantic. The shadow of the lover archetype is supported by cultural narratives. We are told that real love is exclusive, possessive, consuming. We are told that passion justifies irrationality. We are told that the depth of love is measured by the degree of suffering it causes. If you haven't suffered, you haven't really loved. This is the logic of possession, dressed up as wisdom. Think about the countless stories where the hero pursues someone who has clearly said no. He shows up uninvited. He refuses to accept rejection. He wears her down with persistence. And this is framed as romantic, as evidence of true devotion. In reality, this is stalking. It is the refusal to respect another person's autonomous choices. It is the act of prioritizing your desires over their boundaries. But the cultural narrative insists, this is love. And so generations of people have internalized the belief that ignoring someone's no, overriding their boundaries, persisting despite rejection, is not only acceptable, but admirable. Now we arrive at the most difficult territory. We must ask, have you been the possessor? Have you used jealousy to control a partner? Have you made someone responsible for your happiness? Have you ignored boundaries in the name of love? Have you manipulated with guilt or the threat of withdrawal? Have you surveilled, interrogated, demanded? If you answer honestly, the answer is likely yes, at least sometimes, in some ways, because the possessive impulse is not something that only bad people experience. It is a potential within all of us, a potential activated when we are scared, when we feel vulnerable, when we have not done the inner work to tolerate our own solitude. And here's the harder question. Have you allowed yourself to be possessed? Have you sacrificed your boundaries to keep the peace? Have you made yourself smaller to manage someone else's insecurity? Have you accepted surveillance and control because you mistook it for care? Have you stayed in fusion because separation felt like death? The possessor needs the possessed. They are two sides of the same pattern. And many people move between these roles across different relationships, or even within the same relationship. To see this in yourself requires tremendous courage. It requires you to admit that the way you have loved may not have been love at all, but need disguised as devotion. It requires you to acknowledge that you have used people and been used in the service of avoiding your own psychological work. But seeing is the first step toward change. The shadow must be made conscious before it can be integrated. The possessor must be recognized before the mature lover can emerge. We have descended now into the darkest chambers of the temple. We have witnessed how passion transforms into possession, how the lover becomes the possessor, how projection creates suffering. We have seen the neurochemistry of addiction, the psychology of fusion, the philosophy of objectification. We have examined the cultural support for possessive love and the personal patterns that perpetuate it. The question now is, can we find a way out? Can the lover archetype be redeemed? Can we love without possessing? Can we connect without consuming? The answer is yes, but it requires an awakening, a fundamental shift in consciousness. It requires death and rebirth. It requires that we shatter the mirror and learn to see clearly for the first time. This is where we go next, into the light, into the revelation, into the possibility of love transformed. There comes a moment in the life of every conscious being when the mirror reveals itself for what it is. Not a window, not a portal to another soul, but a mirror. And in that revelation, something profound shifts. The philosopher Martin Buber called it the movement from I-it to I-thou. Most of the time, Buber says, we relate to others as objects, as its. They are defined by their function, their utility, their relationship to us. A person is a cashier, a co-worker, a service provider. Even in intimate relationships, we often relate to others as its, as sources of validation, security, pleasure, meaning. But occasionally, rarely, we encounter another person as a thou, not as an object defined by its uses, but as a subject, an irreducible center of experience, a mysterious other who cannot be fully known or possessed or categorized. In the I-thou encounter, Buber says, the between emerges, a sacred space that is neither you nor me, but the relationship itself. This is the awakening. This is the movement from possession to presence. How does it happen? Often it happens through crisis. The relationship collapses under the weight of possession. Someone leaves. Someone has an affair. The suffering becomes too great to ignore. And in the wreckage, in the forced confrontation with reality, you finally see what you've been doing. You see that you've been in love with a fantasy, not a person. You see that you've been using someone to avoid your own inner work. You see that what you called love was actually a sophisticated form of selfishness. And in that seeing, that brutal, humbling, necessary seeing, the old pattern begins to die. This death feels unbearable. Because you're not just losing a relationship. You're losing the defense mechanism that has protected you from existential terror. You're losing the fantasy of completion. You're losing the belief that someone else can save you from yourself. You are being forced to face the truth you've been running from. You are alone. Not lonely necessarily, but alone. A solitary consciousness responsible for creating your own meaning, for filling your own emptiness, for completing yourself. This is what the mystics call the dark night of the soul. This is what psychologists call ego death. This is the necessary destruction that precedes transformation. But here is the mystery. In the very moment when you accept your fundamental solitude, connection becomes possible for the first time. When you no longer need someone else to complete you, you can actually see them. When you stop trying to possess, you can appreciate. When you accept responsibility for your own happiness, you can offer love freely rather than using love as barter for security. This is the paradox at the heart of mature love. You must be whole to truly connect. You must be able to stand alone to genuinely join with another. You must possess yourself before you can stop trying to possess others. The integrated lover archetype emerges from this paradox. It is not about abandoning connection, quite the opposite. It is about learning to connect in a way that honors both autonomy and intimacy, both self and other, both passion and freedom. Let's be concrete about what this looks like in practice, because transformation is not merely a pleasant idea. It must be embodied in actual behavior, actual choices, actual relationships. The integrated lover can feel intense attraction without losing themselves in it. They recognize when an archetype is being activated. They notice the projections rising up. They feel the pull toward fusion, but they don't identify with these impulses. They observe them with curiosity. Ah, there's the anima projection. There's the fantasy of the perfect other. There's the neurochemical cascade promising completion. This observation creates space between impulse and action, space for choice. The integrated lover can feel desire without being compelled to act on it immediately. They can experience attraction without needing to possess the object of attraction. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means holding them consciously rather than being held by them. The integrated lover maintains boundaries, not walls, but clear definitions of where they end and another begins. They can be intimate without merging. They can share deeply without losing their center. They say, I want to know you, but I don't need to possess you. I can appreciate your autonomy even when it's uncomfortable for me. This is radically different from possessive love. Possessive love says, I need access to your phone, your email, your thoughts at all times. Integrated love says, you have a right to privacy, to a life apart from me, to dimensions of yourself that remain yours alone. Possessive love says, you complete me. Integrated love says, you enrich my already complete life. Possessive love says, don't change. Integrated love says, I will support your growth even if it means you grow beyond me. Can you feel the difference? Can you feel how much more difficult and how much more real integrated love is? The integrated lover also withdraws projections. This is perhaps the most important skill in conscious relationship. Remember, projection is unconscious. You don't realize you're doing it. You genuinely believe you're seeing the other person clearly, when in fact you're seeing your own anima or animus reflected back. Withdrawing projection means constantly asking, am I seeing them, or am I seeing what I need them to be? It means noticing when you feel disappointed and asking, what expectation did I place on them that they didn't sign up for? It means taking responsibility for your own emotional reactions rather than blaming the other person for not living up to an ideal they never claimed to represent. This is hard work. Our brains are wired for projection. It's efficient. It's automatic. It allows us to navigate social reality quickly. But in intimate relationships, projection is poison. It prevents genuine knowing. It creates false intimacy. It sets up inevitable disappointment. The practice of withdrawing projection means developing what psychologists call mentalization, the capacity to consider the mental states of others. Not to assume you know what they're thinking or feeling, but to recognize that they have thoughts and feelings that are separate from yours, that may be different from yours, that you cannot fully access. This creates what the philosopher Thomas Nagel called the view from nowhere, the ability to step outside your own perspective and consider that you might not be seeing accurately. It's intellectually humbling. It requires you to hold your perceptions lightly, to remain open to being wrong about who someone is and what they mean to you. The integrated lover also practices what might be called sacred selfishness. This is not the selfishness of narcissism. taking from others to fill an inner void. This is the recognition that you are responsible for your own wholeness, your own happiness, your own development. Sacred selfishness means not making someone else responsible for managing your emotions. It means not expecting them to sacrifice their growth for your security. It means not guilt-tripping them for having needs that don't align with yours. But it also means not sacrificing yourself on the altar of their needs. It means maintaining your boundaries even when that creates discomfort. It means saying no when yes would compromise your integrity. It means leaving when staying would require you to betray yourself. This balance, honoring both self and other, is the art of the integrated lover. It's not about finding someone who completes you. It's about being someone who is already complete and inviting another complete person to share in the adventure of life. Let us turn now to the spiritual dimension of this transformation, because the movement from possession to presence is not merely psychological. It is a movement in consciousness itself, a shift in how we experience reality. In Buddhist psychology, there is a concept called upadana, clinging or attachment. The Buddha taught that all suffering comes from attachment to things that are impermanent. We cling to people, to experiences, to identities, trying to make permanent what is inherently transient, and this clinging causes suffering. Romantic love, in its possessive form, is perhaps the most intense expression of upadana. We attach to the beloved, we try to make them permanent. We resist the fundamental impermanence of all relationships, and we suffer. The spiritual practice is not to stop loving, but to love without clinging, to hold lightly, to appreciate fully while acknowledging that loss is inevitable, to say, I love you deeply, and I know that one day, through death if not before, we will be separated. This knowledge makes our time together precious, but it doesn't make me grasp more tightly. This is what the Buddhists call non-attached love. In Pali, it's called metta, loving kindness that wishes well for another without needing them to be or do anything in particular for you. It is love as a state of being rather than a transaction. The Christian mystic tradition speaks of this in different terms. Meister Eckhart, the medieval German theologian, wrote about detachment as the highest spiritual state. He said we must let go of all attachments, even to God, to truly encounter the divine. We must empty ourselves of all grasping, all need, all demand. Only then, Eckhart says, can we love purely, not because we need something from the beloved, but because love is our nature. We love the way fire burns, not for any external reason, but because it is what we are. This is the integrated lover's love. Love as essence rather than transaction. Love that gives without expecting return. Love that celebrates the other's existence without needing to control it. Love that says, you are free, and I love you in your freedom. But we must be careful here. There is a subtle spiritual bypass that can happen. People sometimes use spiritual language to avoid genuine intimacy. They say they're practicing non-attachment, when really they're protecting themselves from vulnerability. They claim to love universally when really they're afraid of loving specifically, concretely, messily. The integrated lover is not detached in the sense of being distant or uninvolved, quite the opposite. They are more present, more engaged, more alive to the reality of the other, precisely because they're not lost in projection and fantasy. Non-attachment doesn't mean not caring. It means caring without controlling. It means loving without losing yourself. It means being able to feel profound connection without making that connection the totality of your existence. This is a razor's edge. Most people fall off on one side or the other, either into possessive fusion or into defended distance. The integrated lover walks the edge, intimate and autonomous at once. Now let's speak about the neuroscience of awakening, because transformation is not just metaphor or philosophy, it involves actual changes in the brain. When you practice conscious relationship, when you withdraw projections, maintain boundaries, choose presence over possession, you are literally rewiring neural pathways. You are weakening the automatic connections between desire and grasping, between attraction and possession, between intimacy and fusion. You are strengthening the prefrontal cortex's ability to modulate the limbic system's emotional responses. You are creating new patterns of neural firing that support autonomy alongside connection. You are training your brain to experience love without activating the addiction pathways. This doesn't happen overnight. The brain needs repetition to create new patterns. Every time you notice a projection and withdraw it, you're strengthening that neural pathway. Every time you feel the urge to control and choose to let go instead, you're creating new connections. Every time you experience disappointment and take responsibility for your expectations rather than blaming the other, you're training your brain in conscious love. Over time, these new patterns become as automatic as the old ones. Integrated love becomes your default, not because you're suppressing your instincts, but because you've developed new instincts, more conscious, more mature, more aligned with genuine intimacy. And here's what becomes possible when love is integrated rather than possessive: genuine intimacy. The word intimacy comes from the Latin intimus, meaning innermost. True intimacy means being known at the innermost level, not idealized, not projected upon, but seen clearly, flaws and all, and valued precisely in your particularity. Possessive love prevents this. When you're trying to possess someone, you cannot let them be fully themselves. Their autonomy is threatening. Their differences are problems to be solved. Their growth is dangerous. But when you've integrated the lover archetype, genuine intimacy becomes possible. You can let someone see you completely because you're not depending on them to validate you or complete you. You can see them completely because you're not needing them to be anything other than who they are. This creates what Martin Buber called the I-thou encounter, two whole beings meeting in authentic presence, neither possessing nor possessed, both free and both profoundly connected. And this is what most people are actually longing for when they pursue romantic love. Not fusion, not possession, not the obliteration of boundaries, but this: to be known and loved as exactly who you are, to know and love another as exactly who they are, to create together something neither could create alone, not because you're incomplete separately, but because togetherness is its own valid mode of being. Let me offer you a practice, a concrete method for moving toward integrated love. Begin with yourself. Before you can love another consciously, you must love yourself consciously. And I don't mean the narcissistic love that inflates the ego. I mean the compassionate witnessing of your own inner life. Practice observing your thoughts and feelings about relationships without judgment. When you feel attraction, notice it. There's attraction arising. When you feel the urge to possess, notice it. There's the possessive impulse. When you project perfection onto someone, notice it. There's idealization happening. This observing awareness creates the critical distance needed for choice. You are not your impulses. You are the awareness that witnesses impulses. From that place of awareness, you can choose how to respond. Next, practice solitude, not isolation, but chosen aloneness. Spend time with yourself, not distracting yourself with screens or substances, but actually being with yourself. Who are you when no one is watching? What do you feel when you're not performing for someone else's gaze? What is it like to be complete unto yourself? This practice reveals your dependencies. It shows you where you've been using relationships to avoid yourself. It's uncomfortable, which is why most people avoid it. But it's essential. You cannot offer healthy love to another if you cannot be peacefully alone. Then practice presence in relationships. When you're with someone you love, notice when your mind wanders into fantasy, replaying the past, worrying about the future, spinning narratives about what they think of you. Gently bring yourself back to the actual moment. what is happening right now, in this breath, in this shared space. Presence is the antidote to projection. When you're fully present, you cannot project. You're too busy experiencing what is actually here. Practice communication that honors autonomy. Use I statements rather than you statements. Not, you make me feel, but I feel when, and I'm taking responsibility for my reaction. Not you should, but I would prefer, and I respect that you may see it differently. This language acknowledges that you and the other are separate people with different experiences, needs, and perceptions. It prevents the fusion that possession seeks. And finally, practice letting go, repeatedly, consciously, daily. Let go of expectations, let go of demands, let go of the need to control outcomes. Let go of the fantasy that another person will complete you. This doesn't mean not caring, it means caring without clinging. It means loving with open hands rather than closed fists. What emerges from this practice, gradually, imperfectly, but genuinely, is a different quality of love. Not the intense, consuming passion of limerence, not the quiet desperation of codependency, not the safe but distant connection of defended intimacy. Something else, something more mature and more mysterious. A love that is both passionate and peaceful. A love that celebrates autonomy while creating deep connection. A love that can hold conflict without creating crisis. A love that says, I see you as you are, not as I need you to be, and I find you beautiful in your otherness. This is the integrated lover. This is love as a practice rather than a feeling. This is relationship as a path of consciousness rather than a path to completion. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stop trying to possess someone, when you stop trying to complete yourself through them, when you stop projecting and start seeing clearly, that's when real intimacy becomes possible. That's when you can actually connect. Not fusion, but genuine meeting. Not possession, but presence. Two whole people, two complete beings, choosing to walk together, not because they need to, but because they want to. Appreciating each other, not as solutions to loneliness, but as companions on the journey. Loving not to take, but to give. Not to fill emptiness, but to share abundance. The temple of mirrors has become transparent. The reflections have resolved into actual seeing. The lover has been integrated, and something new is born. A love that serves consciousness rather than ego. A love that expands rather than contracts. A love that frees rather than binds. This is the promise beyond possession. This is the revelation beyond projection. This is what becomes possible when we do the difficult work of psychological and spiritual maturation. But the journey doesn't end here. Because integrated love is not just personal. It has implications for how we understand human evolution, how we build society, how we imagine the future of consciousness itself. The lover archetype, when integrated, points toward a new way of being human. Let us look now at what this means, not just for individual relationships, but for the species as a whole. We have journeyed far together, through the temple of mirrors into the shadow chambers of possession, through the awakening of integrated love. We have examined the psychology, the neuroscience, the philosophy, the spirituality of the lover archetype. We have traced its path from unconscious projection to conscious presence. But now we must ask, what does all this mean? Not just for individual relationships, but for human consciousness as a whole. Here is what I believe. The movement from possessive love to integrated love is not merely personal growth. It is evolutionary development. It represents a shift in how consciousness relates to itself and to other consciousnesses. And this shift may be essential for humanity's survival. Consider this. Most of the violence in human history, from domestic abuse to genocide, can be traced back to possession thinking. The belief that some people belong to other people, that some groups should control other groups. That difference is threatening and must be eliminated or dominated. This is the logic of possession writ large, and it emerges from the same root as possessive romantic love, the inability to tolerate otherness, the need to control what we cannot accept as separate from ourselves, the terror of standing alone without defenses. But if enough individuals can do the work we've explored tonight, if enough people can integrate the lover archetype, withdraw projections, honor boundaries, practice presence, something shifts at the collective level. New patterns of relationship become possible, not just romantically, but socially, politically, globally. Imagine a civilization built on integrated love rather than possessive need. A society where people relate as whole beings rather than seeking completion in others. A world where difference is appreciated rather than feared, where autonomy is honored alongside connection, where we can love without devouring. This is not utopian fantasy. This is the next stage of human evolution, and it begins with individuals doing the inner work, one relationship, one projection, one moment of conscious choice at a time. The lover archetype, when integrated, teaches us something essential about consciousness itself, that we are both utterly alone and profoundly connected, that we are sovereign individuals and parts of a larger whole, that we must be complete in ourselves to genuinely join with others. That love is not need transformed into romance, but abundance shared freely. This is the paradox we must live into, not resolving it, but holding both truths simultaneously, alone and together, autonomous and connected, self and other, I and thou. And this capacity to hold paradox, to honor both poles without collapsing into either, is precisely what conscious evolution requires. It is the movement from either or thinking to both and consciousness, from binary oppositions to integrated wholeness. The mirror has become a window. We can see others as they actually are, not reflections of ourselves, but separate consciousnesses with their own depths, their own mysteries, their own irreducible particularity. And in that seeing, that genuine recognition of otherness, we become more fully ourselves. So what do you take from this journey? What truth has revealed itself to you in these hours we've shared? Perhaps you've recognized your own patterns of possession, the ways you've used others to complete yourself, the projections you've cast, the control you've exerted in the name of love. If so, don't despair. Recognition is the first step toward integration. Shadow becomes conscious, and what is conscious can be transformed. Perhaps you've recognized patterns where you've allowed yourself to be possessed, where you've lost yourself in another, where you've sacrificed your autonomy for security, where you've accepted suffocation as devotion. If so, know this: you can reclaim yourself, you can establish boundaries, you can learn to love yourself consciously before seeking love from others. Or perhaps you've glimpsed the possibility of something different, a way of loving that honors both self and other, that balances passion with freedom, that creates genuine intimacy rather than possessive fusion. If so, know that this is not just possible but necessary. The future of consciousness depends on it. The work is not easy. Integrating the lover archetype requires constant vigilance, repeated practice, willingness to fail and begin again. You will project again. You will try to possess again. You will merge when you meant to connect. This is the human condition. But each time you notice, each time you withdraw the projection, each time you choose presence over possession, you strengthen the new pattern. You contribute to the evolution not just of your own consciousness, but of consciousness itself. Because we are not separate islands, we are nodes in a vast network of relationship. Every choice you make ripples outward, affecting everyone you touch, who affects everyone they touch. Your personal transformation is collective transformation. Your integrated love teaches others that integrated love is possible. So I leave you with this. The next time you look at someone you love, ask yourself, am I seeing them, or am I seeing my projection? Am I appreciating them as they are, or am I trying to possess them as I need them to be? Am I offering love freely, or am I using love to secure my own completion? These questions are not comfortable, but they are liberating, because every time you ask them, every time you choose consciousness over unconsciousness, presence over possession, genuine seeing over projection, you break the ancient spell. You step out of the temple of mirrors. You become someone capable of true intimacy. And you contribute, in your small but essential way, to the awakening of consciousness itself, to a world where love serves growth rather than stagnation, where connection enhances autonomy rather than destroying it, where we can be together without losing ourselves. This is the gift and the challenge of the lover archetype. This is the mirror becoming a window. This is you, seeing clearly for the first time. The journey continues. The integration deepens. The love matures, and consciousness evolves. May you walk with open hands. May you love without possessing. May you see and be seen. May you honor the sacred solitude at your core, even as you create profound connection with others. May you become the integrated lover, passionate and free, devoted and autonomous, intimate and whole. The temple awaits. The mirror has been revealed. The choice is yours. Thank you for walking this path with me. Until we meet again in the echoes of the ancients, in the depths of consciousness, in the eternal now where all understanding lives.